Creative Living, utilizing today's technology with the best of the past to bring you innovative ideas and up-to-date information for creative lifestyles in today's active world. With your host, Sheryl Borden.
I'm so glad you joined me today for Creative Living. We're going to learn about ingredients and their healing power. We'll talk about how to select fabrics for making quilts and share some design tips for small space living with an interior designer. One of my guests today is Maria Bernardis, and she's written a book about some of the popular ingredients in ancient Greek recipes. She explains that their healing and medicinal use in ancient times is still current, even today. Maria lives in New York City. For many people, selecting the right fabrics for quilts is the biggest hurdle. Marcy Baker is a quilter, author, and teacher, and she'll talk about how to pick fabrics knowing that it will look great when you're finished. Her business is Alicia's Attic in Fort Collins, Colorado. And we'll begin the show with Kimball Starr, who is an interior designer. She's going to talk about some of the challenges of small space living and then present solutions for the overall look of the space. Her company is Kimball Starr Interior Design in San Francisco, California. Kimball, it's so nice to have you here. I'm going to pick your brain on everything I've always wanted to know working with an interior designer. And do people come to you with unusual requests like, I have a small room, but could you make it look twice as big?
Sometimes I do. I mean, I can do some miracles, but I'm not a miracle worker.
I see. So
Yes.
you have to work with what people have.
That's right.
Okay, you have some examples that you're going to show, and if you'll point out things that maybe would help us to reshape a room or how to live with what we have, but maybe make it look better.
Absolutely. So when you want to reshape a room size, this is not obviously doing major construction, but design tricks to make it look like it's a little bigger than it is. So we have three categories. We want to talk about color, which you can use to change a room size. Warm colors will come closer to you and cool colors will move away. And then patterns, which you can use in your flooring or your walls, and then also reflective surfaces. Reflective
like mirrors?
surfaces, yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Reflective surfaces, things maybe glossy finishes, reflect light and make the space feel bigger.
Oh, okay. Those good tips, good
Yeah.
tricks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are some examples
Okay.
illustrating that.
Good.
So here I've used the dark blue color in this bay window to push the bay window out. It was a very narrow bay window, so I wanted to make it feel deeper. And then also, if you notice, the planks are running crosswise, so that helps widen the room.
I can see how that would do that.
Yeah. So that's a good example how
Good
the
tips.
power of paint and pattern. And then here we have another bay window in a bedroom. And the bay window, you notice we have two colors. We have the dark chocolate and the butterscotch. And the dark chocolate frames the bay window, and then I actually did the bay window in butterscotch because the wall continues into the bay window and makes it feel like one big continuous space.
Oh, instead of being choppy.
Exactly.
Stop and start.
Exactly. If I had done the bay window and that whole seating area in the dark chocolate, it would have felt like add-on to the room, and it would not feel nearly as big as it does here.
Oh, okay.
And then another trick is, you notice there's the picture rail, this molding, the
yes,
white line. So it really acts as a way to guide your eye of where it should be looking, and that it elongates the room. And so a trick you can do to make your ceiling seem taller or lower is I put this molding here because I felt that the ceilings were a little too high for the room.
Too high.
In
Okay.
proportion to how wide it was. So by bringing the molding down, it drops the ceiling height.
Your eye comes down.
Absolutely. And another trick is, if you wanted your ceilings to also feel lower, is you could take the ceiling color and paint here, so you actually create a band.
Bring the ceiling down. It would
That's
look
right.
like it was down lower.
That's
That's
right.
a good idea.
And you can do the opposite, where you could actually take the wall color and bring it up into the ceiling about 12 inches. So you create a border around the ceiling, and that will actually make your walls seem much higher. So lots of little fun tricks to do.
And that's just with paint. I mean,
And
how
that's
easy
just
could
with
that be,
paint.
if you know what you're doing.
Well, you know what? I always say paint's the easiest way to make a change, and it's the simplest and least expensive.
Least expensive,
So
right.
definitely experiment.
Okay.
Here's an example of using a reflective surface. By using the mirror, it helps double your space. Wherever the mirror covers, it doubles that area. And also by the long rectangular shape of the mirror, it helps widen the dining room, because it was
Instead of it being turned
right. I mean, I could
vertical.
have done it vertical, and then that would have made it feel higher.
Higher,
But it was it's a lowered ceiling where it's only a little area that the dining table can fit under, so I wanted to make it feel like it was a little
Bigger.
more bigger and gracious.
And I think we've all
than
known
it
about
is.
at restaurants, we'll walk into a room and it just seems so huge, but it's really one wall's all mirror.
Yes,
So you
that's
realize
right.
how that can make
That's
it
right.
seem twice
Or
as big.
dance studios, or yoga
Yes,
studios. It feels like this huge spacious room, and it's, you know, maybe
It's
only-
really tiny.
That's right.
That's a good
So you
idea,
definitely can
though.
use that, you know.
Reflective surfaces.
Right, but don't go crazy. Don't do your whole house in mirrors.
Right.
So here's an example of a hallway where the baseboard trim has been painted the same color as the wall. So instead
I
of
see. I didn't realize that was the baseboard.
yeah,
Now
so
I
there's
can-
a
I
good
can see
6-inch
that.
base right there. So the hallway is very short and narrow, and by using the same color all the way up, it unifies the wall.
Because you would have a brown or white or something along there,
That's
and
right.
that would chop that up.
It's very contrasty. It's the same technique, I like to say, with fashion. So if you wear all black, you're going to look really thin, and it's all the same color. If you wear purple pants, an orange top, a green hat, besides questioning my fashion sense, it
senility.
also chops you out.
I see. Yeah,
So
it
it's the
is.
same idea.
Good point.
Yeah, and then there's also doors in this hallway that I've also painted all the same color. So they're
So it's
all,
a
the trim is blue,
monochromatic.
the doors are blue, and then it just blends away.
And the white then is sort of showcased
Yes.
as an accent.
Absolutely. And in a very small bathroom, which is a very common problem in any urban area.
Yeah, very small usually.
It's very small. This is shower, there's no tub, there wasn't room for a tub. But on the flooring, if you use large format tiles and you angle them, it'll actually make the space seem bigger. So if you run planks front to back, it's going to make your room seem longer.
Right.
If you run them side to side, it's going to make it seem wider.
Wider.
And then if you run it on the diagonal, it widens and lengthens the room.
I've seen places where they were at a diagonal, but it was usually a large entry or something. I wouldn't have
Right.
thought about using a big
Right.
design in a bathroom.
And that is a misnomer where people think, oh, it's a small bathroom, I have to use small tiles.
right.
But it's a thing with all those grout lines. Every time you see a grout line, that's your
that
eye,
chops it
stop,
up.
stop, stop, stop. And if you just see much bigger tiles, and maybe there's only 6 or 8 of them, your eye just flows
Flows.
across the
I
floor
guess so.
and seems more spacious. And same thing with the glass shower. Instead of having a corner shower jutting out, you chop it so it's angled, and that helps keep the flow open as well. And for little small dining areas, you can use cabinetry floor to ceiling, and that's going to increase your ceiling height. And the thing about this is it's all monochromatic, using the dark colors of the cabinetry and using the dark island. All the color just flows, and the floors are dark. So actually, this is something a lot of people don't know, is dark floors actually recede. So your floors will actually feel more spacious if you do a dark color, because the floor is dropping away.
And I would have thought maybe using the black or a dark gray or whatever would make it seem so much smaller.
Yeah, well, you know, it's also because we have these wonderful glass windows that lets in the light.
Okay.
I mean, if you
That's
have
probably counters it, doesn't it?
you do need to take into consideration what else is going on. If you don't have any windows in the room and you did everything black,
tomb.
that probably wouldn't
Yeah,
be
I see.
advisable.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
And then this
Oh, I
last,
love this.
oh, thank you.
I love these colors.
And then this last example is, it's a very contemporary space. There's no molding or trim. It's very straightforward. So it's very architectural, and there's very sharp lines. So by doing this built-in banquette, instead of doing
it
a
softens it, doesn't it? That's why I like
You're
that.
hired.
I'm hired. Good.
That's right. So instead of having a sharp right angle, by creating this curve, it just softens the flow.
It does.
And then the other trick is, if you notice outside the window, there's all this greenery.
Yes.
If you bring in a color from outside that's visible from your room and use it as a major color, as here, so we have all the greenery, and I used...
So it just extends the room indoors,
right.
outdoors.
Because-
That's a great idea.
because it feels like the patio is really part of your living space.
Now, one other question. What about lighting? Is it true that if it's a smaller space, you need more lighting, or what's the secret there?
Great question. So when I said the cabinetry, if you go all the way up to the ceiling, it makes it seem taller.
Right.
If you drop the cabinetry from going all the way to the top, it will make your ceiling seem shorter. But if you put recessed lighting on top and light up the ceiling, that lifts up the ceiling.
I can see how it would do
So
that.
uplighting is really important if you want to increase the height of your ceiling.
And it seems like more and more of the newer houses that I've been in have that, is it called cove lighting or
Yes.
something? And it does,
Yes.
it just looks like it goes on forever.
Yes, exactly.
And some of the rooms aren't all that big.
Cove up lighting is an excellent way to increase the space in your room.
Well, these are great examples. I can see how people would want to apply these if they had a small space especially and make it seem larger. Thank you very much, Kimball.
Thank you so much, Sheryl. It was great to be here.
Thank you. Marcy, thank you so much for coming. I know for people like you who do quilting, a lot of quilting, it's probably not nearly as hard for you to pick fabrics, but I remember when I first was wanting to learn to quilt, I just had no idea what would go well together, what would be the focal point, and it looks so different once it's quilted.
Yes. What we have here is my very first quilt class.
And you learned a lot, I bet.
Oh, I learn a lot on each quilt that I do, and I'm still learning. But this one, they said, pick a fabric here in the shop that you just love, that's several colors in it, and then you need to pick a light, a dark, and 2 mediums that go with that.
1 light, 1 dark, and 2 mediums.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is what I chose. The paisley fabric is what I started with.
This
But
one?
Yes. And when you look up close, you can see the teal and the red that's in it. And that's how I picked my fabrics.
Oh, okay.
But it doesn't show as being teal and red because it's such a small print.
I see.
So anyway, I picked my light, my medium, and 2 mediums and a dark. And you can see all of the fabrics there in that center block, which is called honeybee usually. I call it busy bee because it
This
has so
part.
many fabrics. So that was my very first class. It was all hand-pieced, hand-quilted. Let me show you a couple of other ways that you can pick your fabrics.
Of course, I think if anyone's made a quilt, it's beautiful no matter what.
Every quilt has a wonderful story
It
behind
does.
it and is worth doing.
This is pretty. And you made this one too.
Yes, this is called Winter Snow, out of a book, Not Your Grandmother's Log Cabin, that I published with Sarah Nephew. She intended for all these quilts to be scrappy. And I'm not that comfortable with scrappy and cutting everything out of my stash. So I picked a fabric that I love, and this fabric did not go in the quilt because
I was going to say, I don't see it.
No, it's not in there. What values you need for the quilt is important. This did not fit the values. I needed light for the snowflake and then medium dark to dark for the background to make the snowflake stand out.
And you still do the 1 light, 1 dark, and 2 mediums?
No,
not in this one.
This one has only lights for the snowflakes and then the darks to medium darks for the background.
Oh,
So
okay.
knowing your values, this I would call a medium to a medium light. Doesn't go in this quilt, but it was my palette. So I went through all of my fabrics and I chose anything that was in these colors, but the values of what I needed for the quilt.
How interesting.
So,
well, you did a good job.
Well, thank you very much. I really like this quilt. It's one of my favorites. Here is a quilt that I've started, and a friend who was living in Australia sent me this postcard, and I just love the colors in the postcard.
too.
And so I picked the layout and the fabrics that I chose with what the postcard had in it. And it's just
Oh,
half
okay.
square triangles in it. So,
And that's one of the easier patterns to learn on,
Yes,
isn't
it
it?
is,
That's
yes.
what I learned on. That's how I know that.
half square triangles, definitely.
Okay.
Another way that you can pick fabrics, and I did this in a class with Katie Pasquini Massapust, and the flower picture she gave me. And then we had a bunch of
this one.
squares of fabrics, and we had to pick all the different yellows. We think daffodils are yellow. There's a lot of yellows involved. Light yellow to dark yellow and golds. And then I picked a few greens. Then I tried to lay it out in dark to light. And if you want to know whether you got your values right, a good thing to do is pick up your black, or make a copy, or scan
just
it.
a black and white copy.
Yep, scan it and see, and you can see that that stripe fabric is not quite in line. It
I
needs to be
see that
moved
now.
over.
But it sure looks pretty over here.
It does look pretty, but you can see whether the values are working. And so you would use that for something you need to grade date. I haven't shown a quilt here that really has that, but if you know that's
But
what
you
you
could.
need, that's a good way to
That's
tell.
a good tip.
Yeah. And one other tool that I have that I found is this color wheel. It has all the colors in it, secondary and primary, that we're used to, and it has instructions on how to do opposites on the color wheel or triads or split complementary.
But I've never seen one with these openings. Now, what's
The
that
openings are great because we've got light to dark for each colorway, and it allows you to hold it over the fabric.
Show us what you're talking
if
about.
we're going to pick our yellow for this quilt here,
For the
let's lay
snowflake.
this the yellow over that, and you can see and
Like
squint
here?
at it, and we can see that we're actually lighter than that
this.
yellow here. That's going to work for my light yellows.
Oh,
And here, let's look at this teal on there. And when we squint at that, we can see we're in this range right in here, and that tells me it's going to work for this quilt because I need my medium darks to darks.
well,
So-
isn't that interesting? You could use a regular color wheel, but with this opening, it makes it more, I think, more noticeable.
Yes.
Like
And
in
the
your
thing about
greens?
value, 90% of the work is done by the value and only gets 10% of the credit. 10% of the work is done by color, but it gets 90% of
Right,
the
yeah,
credit.
we just talk about color all with every piece
Yeah, we
that
think
you
it's
have
the
here.
color, but it's actually value
The
that makes
value
the
of it.
design, the structure of the quilt, and the color adds an emotion or you know, just the flavor of the quilt.
Have you ever seen a quilt that was just a total disaster?
Not to me.
I haven't. Yeah, I just think they're all so beautiful. I guess I've never looked carefully enough to see that.
And I think if you make a quilt and you think, oh, this isn't working or I don't like it, if you can put words to why you don't like it, then you can learn from that and do something different in your next quilt, which is what I've done throughout my quilting
Oh,
experience.
Really? Like
Yeah.
what? What kind of words? Like this is too dark or what?
This is too dark or maybe gray. We don't see toned fabrics, which is a grayer fabric in this tool. But if you get toned mixed in with bright and clear, then it can make it look muddy or something's not quite right. So getting it to where everything's clear or that you're only working with toned fabrics.
So even if you may not can describe it in specific ways, you can just help yourself to learn why that combination of fabrics didn't work.
Right, right. You may not know the
Right.
technical, but you can understand, I don't like that, and not do it again.
Well, like I say, my mother and grandmother both quilted, and so I have a great love for the art of quilting. I hope it never goes away.
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
I think that's great. Well, thank you very much, Marcy.
Thank you.
Maria, it's so nice to have you here, and I get to talk to you about things in your cookbook and about how you delved into your Greek ancestry to find out all kinds of things about people you never got to know, but sort of their beliefs and the way they lived. And you say it's helped you.
Absolutely, because I suffered for many years a number of health issues, you know, predominantly cysts that were turning into cancer.
Oh, my
And
word.
yeah, and all sorts of other illnesses. And the doctors kept cutting, like cut 3/4 of my lung out, and then they were cutting other sections of my body, but they couldn't tell me what the issue was. And that's when I was guided that I need to learn how to heal myself and to work out preventative measures. And that's when I worked out that it was a lot to do with my emotions and not dealing with past issues that I had faced in my life as a child. So when I started to deal with that and started to get into the whole organic and eating the way my ancient ancestors did, what happened is all the cysts and everything left my body. And my doctor said to me, I don't know what you've done, but every disease you had in your body and every cyst and everything that you had has left.
Oh, wonderful.
So
well, that's what you really talk about in the book are the ingredients and the healing powers of those ingredients. And tell us some examples of that.
Yeah, well, I can pick some of the ingredients in this lovely soup, I guess, that we'll talk in a minute, which one of them is carrot. And carrot in ancient Greece was called a love charm. And it was used by Hippocrates as an overall healer. So not just for the eyes, but overall healing. And he prescribed carrots to anybody that was, you know, in hospital or needed recovery. So it's a heal all vegetable. Cumin, which I've used as well. Cumin was used because they didn't have pepper in ancient Greece, so it was used instead of pepper, and it was used for digestion. So therefore, when you put cumin in your dishes or crust some lamb with some cumin seeds, it helps with the digestion and calms the digestion. For example, parsley that we also have there to decorate this lovely dish. parsley was also used for digestion, but also for a breathalyzer. So for example, if you had lots of garlic, they would then sit at the end of the dinner table and just chew parsley or basil. And then, for example, other spices like cinnamon. Cinnamon was used to reduce blood pressure. And it's been validated nowadays that cinnamon reduces blood pressure. And it was the reason why the ancient Greece used cinnamon in all their desserts. Because people get excited over a dinner table and their blood pressure rises, so they put it at every opportunity in the desserts to help the blood pressure calm down and calm
for the end of the meal.
Exactly. So every spice, every vegetable has a healing property specific to the body.
And I know in reading the book, I thought it was interesting, you don't necessarily use measurements for specific ingredients. You use what you have and adapt.
Absolutely, because my ancient ancestors used intuitively. They used their senses. So for example, just a quick example, when I measure spices, I smell them. So if cinnamon is much stronger than clove, so that dictates to me that I'm going to put more cinnamon, less clove. So I use my senses, my sight. Is there enough parsley? I'll look. Maybe I need to add more. But the most important sense I teach people at my cooking school is to use their soul, which is their gut instinct. So what's your intuition, or the seed of your soul, which is here in the gut, telling you to do? So if it says to you, add a little bit more salt, then add it. And I always say to people, I don't like to judge people's dishes, because what may taste amazing to you may not taste amazing to me, but at the end of the day, it's what makes you happy, not what makes me happy. And that's why there'll always be different measurements. So no one dish will accommodate every person.
But that does, you're not saying then at a meal we should have versions of it, just have a good variety of dishes.
Exactly, and always have your seasonings there on hand. And I always at my table, I'll have herbs and I'll have seasonings. And then people can take additional herbs and additional seasonings and add it to their dish to make it their own.
I would assume then that you're probably not a big proponent of supplements, because that seems to be what people do now, is if they have read that they need a breath freshener, for instance, they would just take some type of supplement, but you're advocating the use of the fresh ingredients.
Absolutely, and it's so much cheaper from a cost perspective. With supplements, I am an advocate of like spirulina or things that are close to the source. So for example, there are dry vitamins and minerals that we could be taking that are really good for us, that add protein to our diet, and vitamins that are dried herbs. So for example, spirulina is very high in protein and detoxifies the body, so it gets rid of any chemicals and sort of nasties. So I'm okay with that, but the vitamins and minerals that are on the market are actually chemicals, and your body doesn't absorb them very well. So a lot of people are still not getting the nutrition. The best way to get nutrition is to have it in the form of fruit and vegetables,
And I believe I read somewhere you said that let medicine be thy food and food thy medicine, from Hippocrates.
Absolutely, let medicine be thy food, food thy medicine. In ancient Greece, food was the medicine. There was no chemicals. And I asked the question again, why was it that they were able to live, to 150, with no, a large group of them with
Is
no
that
health
still
issues?
true among the Greek? Do they still have longevity?
Now it's beyond 100, so I've met people as old as 130. I certainly have not met to 150, but there's a whole host of other factors now. For example, there's fluoride in our water that didn't exist in ancient times. There are other chemicals that are being used around us that affect us that weren't used in ancient times. Plants were left alone, or if they wanted to get rid of a pest, they'd use limestone. So natural or vinegar, natural ways.
Well, it's really been interesting to read, and the second half of the book, sometimes books are great at the beginning and then they taper off. I really enjoyed the second half of the book, I think, even more, because I liked learning what the different ingredients would do for us. So I really thank you for sending it, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the show today. Next time on Creative Living, we'll begin a new series of shows featuring lots of interesting guests who are experts in different areas. I especially want to thank you for letting us be a part of your television viewing these last few months. And remember to let your local public television station know that you appreciate them carrying Creative Living. Stations have a lot of choices as to programs to carry, and we're very grateful to them for airing Creative Living. And finally, if you ever have comments or suggestions or ideas for shows, you can email me at sheryl.borden@enmu.edu. I hope you'll plan to join me next time for a brand new series of Creative Living.
We are very pleased to offer a special booklet that accompanies this series of Creative Living. We are celebrating our 40th year on PBS. This booklet is titled the 40th Anniversary Series, and it features a wonderful collection of ideas and information, and it's available free of charge on our website. Posted as a PDF file, you can simply download the entire booklet or just the segments you're most interested in. For your copy of this commemorative booklet, go to our website at kenw.org and then click on Creative Living. Scroll down to the booklet section and you can click on this booklet or on any of the other booklets we have available online. We would like to invite you to sign up for our free e-newsletter too. Go to kenw.org and click on the Sign Up Now button and input your email address. That's all there is to it. We would also like to ask you to become a fan of Creative Living on Facebook. Go to facebook.com and in the search window type in Creative Living with Sheryl Borden. Thanks so much. We look forward to hearing from you.